Welcome back to today's episode. We're here to talk about Supacell. It's a 2024 British superhero series on Netflix, created by Andrew Onwabolo, better known as Rapman. The show that sounds like a superhero name. It's not a superhero name. The show highlights the South London setting where 5 black individuals suddenly gain extraordinary abilities. Their parents all have sickle cell anemia or sickle cell disease, and so they don't have the trait. This was something that was interesting to me. I think it's Andre's character who literally says, I've been tested and I don't have the sickle cell trait.
Right.
Which means that genetically, Supacell is like another distinct form that you can get, even though it's connected to sickle cell, but that hasn't been identified by genetics.
So that's what they were saying?
It's not scientifically sound, this series. However, I do like that it's bringing focus to it. It's been very positively... The general consensus has been very positive. Critics have praised both the use of the superhero genre and mixing it with real world issues. 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, 7.0 on IMDb. The Guardian and Empire both awarded it 4 stars, commending Rapman's ability to intertwine social commentary with entertainment. And so we're going to kick this off by doing 5 pros, 5 cons. It's actually the second time we've recorded this because the first time there were technical difficulties. And so this should be fun with us both knowing exactly what we're going to say. But I'll kick it off. I'll give us the first pro for the show. For me was the superpower scenes. I think that in the first episode, and in the finale, that's when they really came out and they showed their true colors. They really pulled off what Heroes did in 2006, 2007. Yeah. Where you had Hiro Nakamura put his finger through the tire, they paid homage to that in the first episode. And it made me think after the first episode that we were going to get a lot more of those type of scenes where people were showing off their power sets in a Fantastic Four type way throughout the entire thing. And so I really like that. And I like that we were able to see the characters not just in Misfits. They kind of did the cheap budget thing where they would save it for certain moments. But in that first episode, they went all out.
I enjoyed the introduction to all their powers. That's really what the first episode is, even though it's called Michael. I thought that it was interesting how some characters had multiple powers. For example, Michael can time travel. I really liked his introductory scene after getting stabbed by Taser, and then he's back in the car. But he can also teleport. Yeah. And then you also have Rod.
And he can freeze time, too.
Yeah, you have Rod or Rodney. He can run really fast. He basically has the Flash's ability. But he also can super heal. That seems like the power.
Kind of like Wolverine.
That's the power I would want out of all the powers, because it seems like you can get anywhere that you want to. It's almost like transportation, and then you literally are invincible.
But it's not immortality.
Yes, but like he had a full scar on his back.
Like if he went through a wood chipper, I think he'd be dead.
Yeah, well, when you saw, though, that he had the full scar on his back from the fire, and then you saw how quick it was able to heal.
I think you could sell any single one of their powers, but my favorite would definitely be the time travel. Like the idea that you could, go back 15 seconds. He can't go by too much further than that, but he can blast to the future.
Right.
And maybe it's a 5 situation from Umbrella Academy, where as he masters the power even further, even though he does have a handle of it now, that he will eventually be able to go back further in time. Well, it would take some extra juice, but maybe.
It reminds me of the character, I think, Dash or Cash from Extraordinary, because,
Dash.
Dash.
He's, it might be Cash. Yeah. No,
yeah, but he's not able to go back just like every single time he wants to. It's only at certain moments.
I thought when you said Dash or Cash, you were talking about The Incredibles, because it definitely is Dash, right? As the kid.
Yeah.
It's Violet and Dash and Helen and what is Mr. Incredible's real name? Bob? I think it's Bob. Yes. So all the games that I had saved for you later on, you've already done, and that's going to be fun. So my second pro for the show is that it does interrelate the stories with strangers as opposed to friends. In Misfits and many other shows, what a writer will do is kind of like set himself up nicely where he throws all the superheroes into one school or into a community service situation where they are forced to interact. And this isn't what we get here. We get all of South London with its gangs and the hospitals and people going about their regular day lives. And the main characters, besides Michael, don't really know each other at all until episodes in. And we keep on seeing them pass by each other in the streets, which I thought was really well written.
Well, not only that, it's like once they pass each other, usually in the same shot, then we will follow that character's story that just passed by that that
every
character.
single one of them is struggling in one way or the other. I mean, I would think that Sabrina probably has the best job of them all as a nurse who just
Right.
got a promotion halfway through the series.
Andre, he's really trying to connect with AJ
He
because
just got
as
out of jail.
he says multiple times, I just got him back because his wife is like now actually allowing AJ to visit him and he's offering to take AJ to the movies, buying him clothes and things like that.
Yeah, Andre's actually from the one when we did that show a really long time ago. The character who I think is people's favorites is Rodney, and he was the drug dealer, but like on the lowest end. He was
Right.
just selling them on the street. He was literally going up to people and giving them his number as the connection. He was in Kingsman, The Golden Circle. He played a character named Brandon, but he reminds me mostly.
Oh wow, okay, so
You
he
know
was
who
one
he
of
is?
Eggsy's friends. I think
Oh,
was he not also in the first one?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, he was one of Eggsy's friends at the very beginning of the movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad you remember him. He reminds me of Chance Perdomo from Gen V. In fact,
Right.
they look similar enough where I feel like had they decided to recast Chance Perdomo's character, who I'm trying to remember what his name was in that. I know they said that they weren't going to do that because he passed away in
Right.
real life, but I think he looks enough like him, and he also has the sort of comic taste. He's able to pull that off
I would
sometimes.
agree. He was the comic relief for the TV series, and
That's
I
what I'm
know that
saying.
you said people. Yeah, that would make sense why he was people's favorite characters. My favorite character was Michael, though. I thought that the second that we were introduced to his time travel storyline in the pilot, that was when I actually started to care for his character a lot.
Michael's a good character. It's just later on I'll talk about his communication with others that I feel like needs some work. My third pro is that this is in good company. The show falls in good company where we had heroes and misfits that everybody was saying it was like those. More recently, the Lazarus Project, where you have a guy who gets absorbed in a sort of time travel mystery where he is going back to try to save his fiance. That's the same thing that Michael's trying to do here. He finds out that Dion is going to die in the future, and so he wants to go back and save her. He wants to just save her in
Right.
general without telling her that it's going to happen. And then obviously extraordinary, the Lazarus Project, and well, the Lazarus Project, I think it's in London, but it could be somewhere else. And Misfits, but those are all London based
I
for the
had
most part.
I had
Mhm.
the Umbrella Academy. In fact, the Umbrella Academy reminded me a lot of season 2. At the beginning of that, they had that awesome fight scene, and we kind of get a glimpse of that at the very end of the first episode of this, where Michael is taken to the future and he sees all of the characters. Seems like in their costumes or suits, about to have a big fight. The boys, Invincible, and even some Daredevil. That was one of my pros as well. Yeah, how
It's also cool how like Supacell has been on the top of Netflix charts for so long, and then Umbrella Academy came out pretty recently with its last
season
season.
4. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they almost like replaced each other. The powers are also very similar to Misfits powers. You got time travel, which Curtis had in Misfits, invisibility, which Simon had in Misfits. And the fact that the creator, Rapman, was so big a fan of the Misfits thing, he just wanted to make it more serious, made me think that Taser's storyline, the invisibility character,
Right.
would have something really, really good. And he was my least favorite character.
Well,
So it's just funny how that didn't end up working out.
The thing about Taser's character is at very first it reminded me of John Boyega from Attack the Block. He's they both are kind of leaders of this gang, and there are other gangs that they are fighting. But yeah, no. So that was it with Taser.
Yeah. The thing about Misfits, though, is it had no problem. I won't say killing off main characters, but it definitely had no problem being like the boys, where it would just
Right.
the deaths would be grotesque, or it would do something crazy with the powers. For instance, do you remember? I think it was Ruth Nega's character in one of the later seasons. She could transport or teleport, kind of like Michael can, and her heart gets like transplanted into someone else, and then they start being able to teleport
Right. Yeah.
everywhere, right? And so I'm wondering how far they're going to push the abilities. Right now, they seem so connected to this genetic disorder, or I guess this would be like a genetic enhancement that they're facing. I'm going to wait to talk about sickle cell for the next point, but
Well, it's also Andre. He reminds me. It's not just Misfits. I mean, you can throw Marvel and DC in there. Andre is like the Hulk. He has super strength. He's able to use it whenever he really wants to. He doesn't have to get really mad. I think
he also doesn't turn into a big clay monster or whatever. like from Fantastic Four.
Right, but then also you have Rodney. He has the Flash's power. Again,
Yeah.
maybe not super healing, but you can see the blue lightning whenever he's running.
And like we've seen since the beginning of time, the powers are fit to the person. So, for instance, he's an Amazon deliverer, and so he's suddenly being able to teleport places.
Michael,
So
yeah,
he's
right.
never going to get a bad review on Amazon again. Sneaky gang leader gets the invisibility power. That seems right up his alley. The separated father who needs to appear strong to his kid suddenly becomes very strong. And Sabrina having to push men away from her sister can literally now do that. And also from herself, because in the first episode, it was really about her own boyfriend that she was
Kevin,
trying to
yeah.
get away. Yeah. And then I think the fourth pro for me is that this thing had noble aspirations. It's part of the reason I think it has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. It brings attention to sickle cell, which I know most people know about. However, they don't know the ins and outs of it. And they show the mom, Michael's mom has sickle cell disease, where she's in agony. She's going into crisis. Her blood is or like it's turning sickle shape, and it's connecting and clogging her her veins or arteries, and it just, it's not a fun disease for any
No.
reason. However, if this puts any sort of hope towards it, another reason to be hopeful is because I know they have like the CRISPR method and stuff that is becoming more and more common, still very expensive, but they are finding ways that could possibly be cures for the future for a mass amount of people, as opposed to just a select few. Up until now, I think it's just been bone marrow transplants that they've had to use in order to help people, and it majoritively affects Black people. They've connected that mostly because I think in Africa, where malaria is such a big deal, sickle trait can actually help with the symptoms of malaria.
And the reason their eyes turn yellow, right? Isn't that
Billy
something to
Rubin.
do with
So,
it?
like, yeah, when someone goes into crisis, which is what they call, again, where the sickle cell blood or the red blood cells become sickle shaped and then they start like clogging, right?
Mhm.
And it becomes very hard for the blood to get through, and it's very painful. That usually happens when someone is like, they need, like, they're out of breath, or they've like maybe
Lack of oxygen. Right.
stressed for some situation. That's why when like we saw Michael's mom in that situation where she was going into crisis, they gave her oxygen. They were trying to, because then the blood can actually unsickle sometimes and
Oh
revert
wow.
back into regular kinds. But yeah, the eyes turning yellow, it's part of the one of the main symptoms of the disease, because it does affect the eyes in the same way. And so you saw them turn yellow in the show.
Well,
as
you
well.
also saw, in the intro. I thought that I
They
kind of
don't
like you
look
were
like
saying,
that though. Yeah.
huge aspirations. It's obvious the show does not have a huge budget, but there are still some really cool scenes that I thought looked interesting. I mentioned kind of before, but episode 5 at the beginning scene where it was Taser who shoots the gun, and then the bullet you see travel in slow motion, and all of them. It kind of pairs back to my first pro. You see all of them use their powers to not get hit by it. I thought that there were scenes like that throughout the series that really worked well.
I thought for some reason that bullet would still end up in Michael's girlfriend, but that didn't happen until way later on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in my fifth pro for the thing is that they do have comic moments. Sometimes they're unintentional comic moments, but the wedding ring scene in the first episode where she sees it in her food, or was it like a drink thing that
She
she
gets
saw?
a plate and it says, "Will you marry me?" And
Yes.
she doesn't realize it's for her.
No, I mean, that's so ridiculous. Like, obviously it was for her. But like, yeah, she stands up and she's like, "Oh no, it's not for me." Think if it was like the next table over. She would have just ruined that surprise yeah. So Rodney using his Quicksilver powers to sell dope faster rather than steal. Like, he could have gone to a bank and taken out all the money. He could have done what Jumper did literally in his thing when he could teleport. But no, he just wants to become a better dope salesman.
Right.
And they do that like add 5 minutes or less. I mean, why would it take him 5 minutes at that point? Andre kidnapping. So when he gets kidnapped in the final episodes, right?
Right. It's the last episode, I think.
I think it was the episode before.
No,
then he
yeah,
gets recruited
penultimate.
in the last episode.
Penultimate, yeah.
Yes. His son immediately joins the gang that Andre has been telling him not to, which I found hilarious because it was just like, okay, like gangs were such a big deal in this series, and it makes sense because Rapman's previous works, the stuff he got famous from, has been about London and about gang life and stuff like that. But it is like almost ridiculous the amount that all these storylines come back to it. you know?
Yeah, well,
Crazy being the gang leader, the main villain, Taser's whole storyline, every single episode. Yeah.
that's going into my cons, which just my first one was it has manufactured drama, and I had AJ getting mad at his dad, even though throughout the whole entire series we had seen the dad try to be a good dad. He's even the same person who was using his own money and didn't want AJ to give back the clothes that he got for him, and it just takes one day of him not even meaning to ignore him before AJ just suddenly joins that gang and he's in it.
Right. And I mean, the full day Andre had been kind of ditching him, so I think that's what pissed him off the
But
most.
it's not just Andre's storyline though. I mean, you can really point out, I feel like, any of the character storylines and be like, did that drama really have to happen?
Sure.
Like,
I think it more felt like the pacing problem was more because of Michael himself. In the first episode, Michael tells himself, the future version comes to him and says, "Hey, I've got this list of stuff that happens. I'm going to show you literally what happens to your
right.
girlfriend. She's in a graveyard now. She's dead. You need to bring together these set of people. You need to explain to them how to stop the villains of the future." And so he has that moment to do that. And he comes back, and I expect the next episode to get him in gear, finding these people. He can time travel, stop time, teleport, and yet it takes him almost 5 episodes to accrue everybody together, and he struggles to even pronunciate what he or like and get out the words that he's supposed to get out. For instance, when he's trying to find Taser and Taser's like goons or
I
whatever,
think that might have been episode 3. Yeah.
yeah, it's already episode 3. Should have been able to do this in episode 2. But Taser's goons come out. They have their cell phones right in front of him. He could have frozen time, grabbed the cell phones, looked up Taser's number, right?
Yeah.
Or just taken the cell phone, called from that phone, and when Taser answered, been like, "Hey, I have the reason I was able to get this phone is because I have this ability. I know you have abilities." Like, he was able to prove the ability that he had really quickly. They all mastered their powers very quickly, which is very good
Yeah.
for a show like this. But he's not able to convince anyone. He proves he's from the future. He proves he knows what's going to happen, and they all dismiss him so quickly when he does so. So there are multiple problems with the realism of all that happening.
Well, I think a big problem was that, yeah, it was a really cool scene. In fact, it probably was my favorite scene out of the entire series at the end of episode 1 when you see downtown London and they're gearing up for this huge fight scene. But yeah, it takes until like episode 5, and Andre isn't even there before that we get to see them even fight with each other. Like, I know The Defenders wasn't a great show, but at least that only took 3 episodes before we saw everyone use their powers. Here it was like he's speaking to Rodney for a long time. Yeah, sure, he talks to Sabrina, but it takes until the end of the 5th episode before they're like, all right, let's all fight together.
Yeah, it was my biggest complaint for the show is that after the first episode, you were sold a false bill of goods because it made it seem like that cliffhanger, like you were saying with the Umbrella Academy.
Yeah.
At the beginning of each scene, they would show you an apocalypse from the character's perspective. And by the end of that season, you would always get to that event, that apocalypse.
And it wasn't as cool. Wasn't as cool.
Okay, from the Umbrella Academy.
Yeah.
But I'm saying for this, apply it to here, we never even come close to what that ending event was, or the ending event of the first episode was by the end of this first season. We were barely like 25% of the way there. And though I know that Rapman wants to go 3 seasons with this thing, it does feel like the cliffhanger of the 6th episode is so much worse than even the first episode's cliffhanger, which still applies.
I am applying it here though, because Crazy, when he has his full fight scene with everyone, it's not downtown London. It's like an abandoned alleyway with a couple abandoned apartments. It was nowhere near as cool. And if you want to talk about an overall story,
what do you mean it wasn't downtown London though?
When the first episode, I mean, wherever that.
Oh, you mean it wasn't broad daylight?
Yes.
It wasn't.
It wasn't as cool as it made it seem. It's like the characters don't even have their costumes
that
yet.
I can excuse, but I would have rather had that second episode happen or that 6th episode happen episode 2. You know, it just didn't progress in the way it should have.
Well, and also Dion dying. What'd you feel about that? Because I felt like I understood why they did it. They wanted to make it sad, but it just felt like really Michael in that whole entire time. He never even
really
tried
upset
anything
that
about it.
in that final battle that he kept telling her to go to the car and wait. as opposed to taking 2 seconds to use his ability to teleport her
Teleporter
back
somewhere
home
else.
and
Yes.
then teleport back. It was the most predictable thing to see her die at the end of that, but also to have the lady from the first episode or second episode who came in to talk to Michael's mom about delivering her to a biotech facility that was going to help with her sickle cell, right?
Yeah.
And make her evil. Like, I knew she was evil the first time we saw her, and I didn't even think that that was supposed to be up for discussion. Like, I thought it was just clearly known, and yet they treated it in that last episode, the last 10 minutes, as if that was the biggest reveal of all time.
When it came to the final 30 minutes of the finale, I thought there were so many things you could point out that was wrong with it. But even talking about that final scene, they brought back Crazy, even though he was dead when they had that fight scene, just to kill him
He
again.
was on his last breath, is how they put it. And I think they just brought him back because they wanted to spoon feed to the audience just what we saw already.
Well, I think it was a way
in
that
case people got lost in the action.
it was a way to show people that she was evil because she comes in and says a couple words
Right,
to him,
but it was
just
already so
felt
obvious.
Yeah, he was already dead. So why did they do it? I don't know.
Okay, so my third one was, so why did it take the biotech agency so long to capture these people?
Right.
So, like, they had eyes on each one of them. We saw them watching Sabrina outside the bar. We saw them, even though they thought it was Charlene who had the ability, we saw them see Andre break into the ATM where he got all the money. We see them identify Rodney because they do try to pick him up later on. But very rarely do they ever try to pick these people off while they're alone or while they're sleeping or at any point where they wouldn't be the biggest threat, because when they wait till they're all together to then try to swoop them all up in one go, that seems like the stupidest idea.
Well, and we see how fast they get the information, not only with what you were just saying, but also in episode 3 when Kadeem, I think he either tries to rape Charlene, or it was Charlene, and then Sabrina saves him. We see right away once he dies, he hits that wall, that his picture says deceased over it at the very end, and that was right afterwards.
I think Raymond also, they were able to like follow him when he was going in his Quicksilver path. Like, they showed how quickly he was moving. So he already has to have a tracker inside of him.
Right. Yeah,
which doesn't make much sense to me. But if they could pick these people up at any time, they probably should have done it before they all grouped together.
That was a huge problem with me because the evil facility is a trope that has been done in every single series that you can think of. Gen V did it recently, but Heroes, Stranger Things, I mean, take your pick. It felt like it was just overly done, and that's why I really didn't like even the first scene that they had of the series where the girl dies after she rips off the metal door.
My thing that with Taser though, I feel like I haven't talked about his character enough. Him and the gang, I feel like were the biggest drawback when it comes to why, besides Michael going around and not being able to sell the apocalypse coming well enough, Taser's a psychopath.
Yeah.
And yet he's supposed to be a main character. And all he wants to do is stab people. He's angry and he's stupid and he's a miserable person. And whenever he gets his ability, when he finally masters it, he's not there to like try to help anybody, or even if he had a heart of gold, like he doesn't have that. He's just going around killing people, proud of when he kills people, proud of when he steals from people, getting very insecure when someone attacks one of his people, but then like not, it's exhausting watching Taser and his gang and being told that we're supposed to sympathize with them. I never sympathized with any of those characters. I feel like Taser could have been written out, but then I feel bad because I think Rapman, I think that's where he was writing from. I think that's why he gave him the Simon ability.
It's just
he thinks that Taser is a nicer character than everybody else sees.
He never has a come to realization moment of all the people he's been killing. I was waiting for that the whole series. It never happens. I mean,
even by the time that he started killing a ton of those other gang members when he was invisible, that's where I was like, this guy's irredeemable. No matter what you do with his character in the future, if you completely change the way, if he gets a knock to the head and he suddenly becomes someone else, like, it's not going to change all this shitty stuff that he's done.
When we saw him
I'm not rooting for him.
In the front flash in episode 1, I thought he was going to be like a cool Diego knife type of person. But yeah, no, I agree with you. He was definitely an unlikable character. I mean, he's the one character that feels like the fish out of water from all the other stories.
It's a shame because I get they're trying to balance it maybe with like a little bit more edgier guy. But they have Michael and Andre and Raymond, and all of them, none of them are perfect. In
Right.
fact, with Michael, if you're trying to say, oh, he's such a swell guy because at least he's not doing anything illegal, unlike the other two, he has this super expensive car, which we don't know how he affords in the first episode. Then he buys a ring for his new wife. He's got this super nice apartment. His mom is at one of the fancy hospitals, not one of the because they have free healthcare there, but this is looks like one that they have service for constantly. She has a private room and everything. Um, and it's like, how is he affording all this with his salary and his future wife on a social worker's salary? It doesn't really add up. And so and then also, like, again, his I know that doesn't say he's a bad guy, but it's odd. Like, none of that was as cohesive as I think it could have been.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's overall. I'm going to have to give the episode or the series really a 6 out of 10. I probably would have given the pilot something high like a 7.5 out of 10 based off of what they were promising us. But I think that even though the pacing, because they're all 50-man episodes except from the finale, was very slow, I did think that like seeing the power, seeing it come to life, I think it gets a passing grade from me.
Okay, for me, I would love to give it a passing grade. I'd love to grade it on a curve because of the stuff it talks about with sickle cell and the fact that, like, it's bringing attention to stuff. Also, they filmed the whole thing with an RE23 camera, which is supposed to show darker skin tones better, which I found like a very interesting fact, given that all the leads are black. And I want to say African American, but it's a British show. So I'm gonna give it a 4. I like the superhero fights, but I feel like there wasn't enough movement in the show. Maybe if they'd gone case by week, it would have been better.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah. But thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.